Hey everyone, I hope you're genuinely having a fantastic day so far. Today, I want to talk about not just personal branding, but how you can exude a strong brand in person. Okay, so I'm not talking about the online and all that kind of jazz there. How do you really command the right level of energy or attention or influence the way you want to do it? And, obviously, there are some people who are just able to just attract a certain aura. Okay, they have a certain approach potentially, or they just have it. Okay, whether we believe that or not, these people command a certain type of attention. But I do believe to some degree we can engineer that, okay, as best as we can. We may not have the same source or yay as somebody else, okay, but at the same time we can improve our ability to influence and attract. And so I've come up with this 5-step framework, which I call the 5 pillars of mastery. That's mastery with an I, based on my company. And really it stemmed around these 5 different factors. And I've got my notes to remind me in terms of breaking it down. So the first pillar is audacious authenticity. Then we've got crystal clarity. Then we have considered communication. We have voracious vitality. And we have perceptive persuasion. So I'm going to get into all of these different things. And if you want to actually take an assessment, a quick quiz to see where you land based on these 5 different pillars, then check out the link below and you'll be able to see and take this test and see where you rank and score. And it'll give you some suggestions and improvements as well. So the first thing is audacious authenticity. So what I've got here is essentially you have to be able to position yourself as somebody who is unapologetically themselves. Now, I'm not saying you need to be rude or disrespectful or any of that stuff, but you have to be able to connect to self. Why? People are attracted to those people. But of course, there are people who don't like those people. And at least you are efficient in your approach in terms of being very clear as to the sort of person that you are. And so what that specifically looks like is you need to be able to relate to people, okay? And how you do that is sharing stories, sharing anecdotes, sharing different things that allow you to connect with different people. So if someone's talking about something, you need to be able to relate to them based on sharing a story that you have. People need to be able to feel your values. And so if you don't have any stories, I'm not saying engineer some stories, but there are going to be hallmark things that happen within your career, within your relationships, within your personal life, within your health, that you can sort of connect with people on. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have to be able to show some element of vulnerability. And some people may say, actually, I don't want to do that within a professional setting. They ain't my friends. They're not my family. They don't have to be. But the vulnerability part is not about sitting around the circle and crying. It's more about being in a position where you're able to just say what you need to say. You need to just speak your mind and not be afraid of the consequences attached to it. Because if you have the audacity to speak the way you need to speak, then there's a certain level of respect and actually people open up to you more. And this is why we're in a space and an era and an age where people are loving hearing people talk about themselves, and not even necessarily themselves, but just being sincere, okay, being open. So having that open dialogue is key, but you have to have the bravery to be able to reach out and start first. And so with that in mind, I think it's important to understand that it's about developing a certain level of trust and rapport. That's what it looks like. It's a certain graph where when you elicit this level of vulnerability, people are more able to open up and be themselves because you're giving them breadcrumbs. And of course, there are going to be some people who require you to do that more before they feel comfortable to do that. And that's stuff they need to deal with themselves. And that's totally understandable. But be a leader. All of this stuff I'm talking about in terms of personal branding online or offline, should I say, in person, is about leadership skills. Okay, you're leading yourself. You have that self-awareness and that self-management to understand how to maneuver. Okay. The third thing is to avoid any form of copying someone else or imitation. You have to be original. Okay. And being original means not just leaning on AI as an example and not sort of like humanizing it. It's not just trying to copy what somebody else is doing. Yes, you can utilize these things and people for ideas, but I'm telling you, people sense when there's imitation around. And what that means practically is people can pick up if this is generic information or generic behaviors based on certain conditions that happen. But if you truly think for yourself, okay, it starts with philosophy, it starts with the mind, then you're positioned in a way where what you express, what you do, is seen. And this is why it's important for you to understand your own philosophy, your own understandings, your own ways of thinking and your approach to stuff. Don't be afraid to think, because that ability to think and then organize that information or banter back and forth with different people and sort of like organize that information is fundamental to how you express yourself in terms of your behaviors. So that's the first part, audacious authenticity. And I've got a video on leadership actually where it breaks down this stuff into a bit more detail. So you can check that out if it pops up on this video at some point. Next, we have crystal clarity. Now, in some ways, I've spoken a lot about this stuff because it comes down to who do you want to become. And that sort of determines the values that you want to sort of like lean into. But we don't want to just talk about that stuff. I think if we're accelerating it and assuming you've done all of the work behind the scenes, what clear goals or goal are you trying to achieve? Who do you specifically help? How do you position yourself? The clearer you become, the better. And that clarity links to audacious authenticity, because you can get clear with something, but it doesn't feel right. It's not aligned. And if it's not aligned, if it doesn't feel right, then it means that actually it's not clear. There's a blocker. So you have to kind of undo certain things. So coming up with an I help statement to a degree, okay, is something that becomes really important, okay? And so I've spoken about that whole I help statements before. I help audience achieve X by doing whatever framework or methodology you utilize, okay? That's the first thing. The second layer to that is really coming down to how people sort of like, what's the word? I guess it's how they see you and how you approach yourself to different people. And so what I'm basically saying here is that you have to be clear about how you want to be perceived. And I guess this comes down to the fifth point, but I'll come back to it. So your dress code, how you speak, you know, where you're at, the sorts of behaviors that you exude and all that kind of stuff there. All of this comes down to clarity. But I would even accelerate that into the next point, which is centered around considered communication. How you communicate yourself to other people is fundamentally important. And so I'm not just going to talk about deep listening and blah, blah, blah and all that kind of jazz there. What you wear is key. I spoke about colors in my previous video and all that kind of stuff there. The suit that you wear, or the t-shirts that you wear, or the dresses that you wear. I'm telling you, if you want a little hack, ask ChatGPT to help you. I'm not gonna lie. Like, you explain to ChatGPT who you are, or upload some pictures of yourself and just basically say, hey, can you dress me? Give me some examples of things to wear based on the seasons and based on the fact that I go here and I go there. And if you want a visual representation, then basically get it to draw some sketches for you. That's a hack, fam. Pay me later, innit? Seriously, it works really well because I know my missus is doing it because I suggested it to her. But the point being made is you need to be able to communicate your brand. People need to feel it. Do they get a rich feel, a wealthy feel, a humble feel, a confident feel, a sensitive feel? Or like, what feel do they get? So that, alongside great etiquette, my friend Katrina speaks about this all the time. You have to have etiquette. There is a code. There is an approach in terms of how you operate. And if people see that you've got good etiquette in terms of I guess it's showing a certain level of humble confidence, okay? And what I mean by that is it's humble confidence aligned to a certain level of respect, understanding and recognizing that other human beings have inherent value and operating in that way. That's where the etiquette is born, because inherently you love thy neighbor. You truly believe that as a statement. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. You know, respect should be in an empty place where love should be. Leo Tolstoy said that. Said that really weird, but yeah, you can check out his quote. And so etiquette, respect, humble confidence, these all communicate a likable person. But of course, there are other things related to this stuff. So if you have the ability to have the right balance between empowerment, entertainment, and education, okay, the three E's. Education really is being or having the ability to inform. So before you say anything, don't say anything that you either can't back up or you don't know to necessarily be true, or at least observable. Okay, that's the first thing. So be very careful with what you say and how you say it. I'm not saying don't say anything at all. It's better to say something if you feel you need to say something, but practice the art of communication. Be considered with it. This is why it's called considered communication. Then empowerment. If you can uplift and motivate and inspire individuals in the right way, not in a preachy way, but in the right type of way. And not everyone's going to get what you're saying. Obviously, me speaking to you right now, you may feel inspired by it. Actually, you may feel like, just shut up. It's whatever. Like, I'm not going to resonate with everyone. But you have to be able to have the ability to empower the right type of person. And then, of course, entertainment. What do I mean by that? It's good to be funny. Like, it's good to have a laugh. And I'm not saying in terms of folly and stupidity, although there's a time and place for that stuff, but banter is great. Understand the banter of your audience, how you can sort of like maneuver those people. And that audience could be one person. It doesn't have to be many people. And so you've got the three E's, you've got your dress code, you've got all of that kind of stuff there. I guess the thing I'd say is you have to know how to self-monitor, okay? And so this is essentially knowing how to adjust your sort of like approach to different people, but also adjust your communication style to a degree. Now, some people may say that's not audacious authenticity. There are going to be some situations where a certain level of diplomacy is required, only if it creates peace, but not at the detriment of the goal. If the goal requires you to be brutally honest or lovingly honest, whatever that looks like, then that's what the goal requires you to be. But if you understand what the long game is or the medium game is, and diplomacy is required, then those adjustments are necessary. And this is where self-monitoring comes into play. You may have never heard anyone say it the way I'm saying it, but these nuances are really important. Okay? Nuance is key. And there are some people who just, they get it, but they like, I don't want to play the game. And who said there's a game being played? And even if there is a game being played, so what? It's not about, I want to be very clear with my words. Honesty prevails, for sure. But sometimes it requires you to go down a certain route before that honesty is completely revealed, because it will reveal itself at some point. And so bear this stuff in mind. It'd be remiss of me to not mention, obviously, the great coaching aspects that I talk about before in terms of deep and active listening, empowering, and strategic questions, and also great feedback as well. These things are really, really important when it comes to good communication. Okay? So think about all of this stuff. Think about how you're presenting yourself. Think about all of that stuff. And does it match the brand that you have online that you're trying to at least build or develop at some point anyway? Then we have voracious vitality. Voracious vitality. To me, this is all about energy management. And it comes down to how do you manage your activities? Okay, so in terms of what you do, but also how you look after yourself. So let me break it down a bit more. So if you are managing your activities in such a way where it's conducive to a specific goal, then you're creating efficiencies. You're being efficient, you're being productive, you're being intentional. The second thing is the personal aspect. This really comes down to what you eat and how you exercise, okay? And sleep and things like that. You know, Mrs. Gren, for those of you who remember that as millennials, Mrs. Gren was about the 7 sort of like elements to life. I think it was movement, respiration, sleeping, nutrition, excretion, reproduction, and growth. Okay, so making sure the vitals are on point when it comes to our biology in every shape and form. Obviously, sleep starts the day before, so the routine, the setup for that is really important. Whether it comes down to turning off the lights 2 hours before you go to sleep, making sure that you're not on any device an hour before. For many of you, that's going to be very difficult, including myself. Maybe it's a thing where you lock your phone away in a specific device where you can't access it, or maybe you put it on do not disturb mode or grayscale mode or whatever it may be. Maybe it's just not having sugar at least 3 hours before you go to sleep, because sugar is known to keep you awake. Okay, it's exercising. Do you do home workouts? Do you have a plan in place? Do you need a virtual personal trainer, or do you need to go to the gym? Are you going for walks? Are you doing your 7 to 14,000 steps a day, whatever that looks like? Can you have an excuse to walk more? What are you eating? Are you removing sugars or carbs and all that kind of stuff there? I'm saying all this stuff because if you're more vitalized as a person, if you're more energetic as a person, people are more attracted to you. You look better, you feel better, and more people want to speak to you. That's just how it is. So lean into that if you can. And if there are things that are stopping you from doing it, then get accountability from someone or persons who can help you, who can position you, who can put you in a better position. I'm doing that myself because I've kind of gone wayward a little bit, got a bit excited, you know, during birthday times and stuff. Need to get back on track. The other thing to say is consistency. So if someone's consistently seeing you in person, okay, or at least seeing you via video call, but in person is better, of course, there's a natural sort of like trust that is developed. I don't know if there's an exchange of, well, not quite pheromones, but maybe oxytocin would be something else. But let's say there is an exchange of something. There is a deeper trust because I'm seeing you for you. I'm experiencing your beingness. And so if this is you turning up to events or meetings or whatever it may be, turn up. I know it's long, especially after the COVID era, but it will benefit you, I'm telling you, because you just have something won over somebody else who may only be experiencing somebody virtually, especially if it's just the, typing and all that kind of stuff there. So all of this stuff is important. You also want to make sure that when it comes to your energy management and everything else, maintaining a certain level of focus and, sort of like body language and all this kind of stuff there, which links to considered communication, is key. So understanding human psychology is fundamental to this stuff. I'm telling you. And so finally, I want to talk about persuasive perception. Okay. So really, you could argue everything that I've discussed really comes down to persuasive perception. And this is your ability to influence, essentially. That's all it is. And so reputation management is key. And how do you manage that? Apart from everything else I've spoken about, it comes down to feedback, asking people for feedback, getting that information so you understand how to make tweaks and improve things. When you treat everything like an experiment, you understand what needs to change and what doesn't need to change. So having that right level of feedback is key. I think in addition to that is also making sure that you know how to be a great communicator. It comes back to the communication point. And telling the right level of stories or engaging people the right way is key for that persuasive perception. But I think the point I want to make here is that you have to have some sort of way of checking if you're doing a good job, whatever that looks like. So I've said this before, every time I leave a contract, I ask 3 questions. What did I do well? What could I improve on? Is there anything else that you would like to state? And that really helps. It helps me understand how I can be more persuasive, more influential moving forward. But I think another thing that is great for the persuasive perception is personal development. And I don't do this as rigorously as I did before because I've read over 400 plus different books. Not everyone's going to do that. And I've also gone on multiple different courses and, I'm a trained coach and all this kind of stuff there. But so what? What has been great has been having the ability to review and reflect, having a medium to do that. So some of you would check out my life navigation system, which is a Notion template, which helps you do that very well. Other individuals will use journaling in order to do that. Whatever you utilize, YouTube, courses, programs, accountability buddies, mastermind groups, find ways to enhance the internal so you can be more persuasive and more powerful, because the more feedback you get in terms of information, the more persuasive and powerful you are as an individual. But also you have to understand suggestibility, okay? And suggestibility comes in the form of utilizing body language to steer people a certain way, or saying things to at least allow people to believe that they are the ones that came up with the idea in order for you to facilitate a specific goal. And I mean, there's a great book called Cues, I've forgotten who it's by, that talks about all of this stuff in detail. There are many books centered around this stuff, but a book isn't enough. I would say the way to develop this is to observe people, whether it's on public transport, going for walks, etc., etc., and understand how they just react to things, how they maneuver. Having the ability to observe and go deeper into why people do what they do gives you license to understand how you can influence people. Some people may say manipulate. My friend Lily, who I met through contracting, she calls me a puppet master because she's seen me do this stuff, and it's not for malpractice or malintention, but there is a way you do it. And whether it means being dumb or acting dumb or being super intelligent or being the big bad wolf in order to facilitate action, it's about getting the result. It's about getting the goal. And so it's knowing your audience and your environment in order to understand how to facilitate and maneuver the way you need to maneuver. So this becomes really important if you're consulting, contracting, because it's all people. It's all people in this new age where the career is about creation as opposed to pursuit. It's about people. If you can understand people and if you have a strong brand, you're more influential by nature. As John C. Maxwell said, and I said this before, when it comes to leadership, it's simply influence, nothing more, nothing less. So hopefully this has given you some insights in terms of what you can start to do to develop a strong in-person personal brand. And of course, if you want to see more videos centered around topics like this, or portfolio careers, or anything centered around this type of stuff, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.